Okay, I'll start. Good evening, everyone. We're here to discuss zero hunger. Our speakers today, excuse me, Orient Square is an initiative of Omisha Foundation, a nonprofit organization that focuses on nurturing conscious global citizens. Square has promoted the Vong movement, which is about bolstering the voice of the new generation to accelerate the adoption of sustainable practices by the global community. Today, we'll be talking about the second goal of the SDGs, which is zero hunger. Our speakers for today are Kushi, Ishta, and Shaurya. Would Kushi like to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. This is Kushi, and I'm a second year philosophy student from Hansraj College, Delhi University. And of course, it is a great opportunity to be present here as a Mongol and sharing my views on one of the most important issue of the current scenario. And yeah, to tell more about myself, I like writing and I'm passionate about doing something for community. So that's the major goal why I'm here. And yeah, I'm really glad to talk to you all.
Ishta, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Ishita and I'm one of the Wongers, and it's a great experience here because I get in touch with so many young people who are so aware. I think when I was at their age, I was not as aware as I've seen so many people be so vocal and so aware of all the issues that we are grappling with at the moment. And all the other colleagues that I have, they are so supportive, and it's a great thing, and I'm very excited to be talking about this very important issue today, zero hunger, and especially at this time when India has been at the lowest rung, at least according to global estimates. So it is very important that we talk about this and raise awareness about this. Thank you, Avisha.
No problem. Shaurya, would you like to tell us about yourself? Shaurya, am I
Yeah, yeah,
audible?
yes, you're audible. Visha. Right. Thank you, Visha. So good evening, everyone. My name is Shaurya. I hope, right. Thank you, Aviksha. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Shaurya Mahajan, and I'm a Mongol. As mentioned by earlier as well, it is a great platform for everyone to come and see. We have seen that in today's generation, me myself, right? If I talk to my juniors, I see that people are much more aware about issues nowadays than they used to be. The today's topic, which is zero hunger, which is the SDG 2, is part of the 2030 UN global agenda for sustainable world, right? And it's one of the most important things in the world. We see how this particular topic is at the centermost and the foremost of all of these agendas as well, and it's interconnected as well. We see how Southeast Asia, especially countries like India, and especially countries in Africa, the countries which are most hit by global hunger, and that is why it's imperative that people come together, raise awareness, and take up steps to solve the issue.
Thank you, Shaurya. Nitin, sir, would you like to say anything? Okay, sir. All right. Kushi, would you like to express your views on the topic this time?
Yeah, sure. You very well explained the topic and why is it important to discuss the topic in the current scenario. According to me, that talking about zero hunger at the rates which we are currently seeing and the schemes and policies, the condition of the policies in the countries, we really need to raise voice against it. We really need to create awareness among the youngsters so that we have a safe and a sustainable future in the world where at least people have their hunger satisfied.
Okay, let me throw in the first question then. What do you mean by zero hunger? What does it mean to you? Anyone can answer. Ishita, Kushi, or Shaurya.
I go first. Basically, zero hunger, as the name of the goal says itself, the word zero hunger, right? They refer to a stage in the world, entire world, wherein there are no people who are hungry, there are no people who are malnutritioned, there are no people who are dying of starvation and these effects, right? It's about not only about having the food, and it's about the people's ability to get food all year round, right? Because this incorporates it. It's not just about giving people the food at every point of time. It's about them having the ability to get it in a repetitive cycle. It's basically about having ensuring there's no people who are dying because of inaccessible food. We see that if we take up statistics, we see that there is more than enough food for the entire population. But there are reasons such as wastage of food, inaccessibility, and other climatic factors in particular regions, right, which are affecting people because there are regions in Asia itself, even in India itself, where there's ample amount of food, states like Punjab, Haryana, northern states. While there are states in the states like Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, there are states where there's starvation, where there's famine, where these issues come arise from time to time. All the government has taken various steps, right? In international as well, we see agencies, the UN and agencies taking steps. We need to understand first the problem needs to be very well defined. It's been done by this global hunger SDG2, and that is why how now we can take steps in order to solve that and reach that goal till 2030 comes.
Very well
Yes.
put. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I wanted to add that apart from what Shoya said, that zero hunger is also about equal accessibility of nutritious food by all by in 2030. So it's not only like we can't expect a bulk of burgers all around the world and we say that it's we have achieved the goal of zero hunger, but we need to we need to see that the food that is there is nutritious and is accessible by equally accessible for everyone.
Okay, Kushi, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to sum up both the answers, and I would put it in this way that there are two aspects to zero hunger. First is ending hunger, as both of them very clearly mentioned. And when we say zero hunger, not just the hunger that is apparent, that is lack of food, having a hungry stomach, going to bed on a hungry stomach, also the hidden hunger part, the malnutrition part that goes unaddressed, at least currently. And the second aspect to zero hunger is accessibility to an inclusive and sustainable food system, the agriculture that we have today, because there is a rampant requirement, increasing requirement of food because of the population boom that we are going through. The agriculture system is becoming very unsustainable. There is overuse of groundwater, there is overuse of chemical fertilizers and these things. So zero hunger includes both the parts. That is, let not anybody go hungry, let not go anybody malnourished, even if they have a filled up stomach, and also let the agriculture not harm the environment any further than it already has. Because today, temporarily, we might have enough food using the chemicals that we are using, but in the very near future, we might not, our soil might not be able to yield enough food. I mean, half for feeding even half the population. So zero hunger, this is what zero hunger would mean, I think should mean to everybody at the moment.
Very well put. You've brought all points together. According to you, what's the scope of the problem then? We've talked about the factors. What's the scope of the problem?
Right. So scope of the problem, like as we discussed, as Ishita also mentioned, Kushi also mentioned, scope of the problem is not just limited to ensuring no one goes to bed hungry or that no one doesn't have enough food to two meals a day. It's also about ensuring that these people are not malnourished, that is, they have a proper diet, a healthy balanced diet, right? And B, very importantly, they are having the ability to procure the said food all year round on a regular basis, right? That they have the ability to do so without the aid of any third party. They need to be made capable enough. Now, this is something which actually encompasses all of the goals together itself. That when we talk about things like ending poverty and other things, right? These are things which wherein they all interconnected and these steps need to be taken in a multi-faceted or in a multi-dimensional way. And that is why the scope of this challenge, of this very problem of the second SDG is very wide, because we see this can apply to a multitude of regions, right? we can also subdivide it into, for example, let's say pregnant women, or let's say old people. Like for example, for old people, if they require certain amount, certain type of food, something that, or for infants they require certain type of food, that would also be, in my opinion, considered under this very SDG header.
Okay. Ishta, Kushi, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, like when we talk about the scope of the problem, Shaurya very well mentioned that what can be the scope of the problem. But while diving to the core of it, we need to realize that we have policies, we have that concern in the government, in the community for achieving zero hunger. But again, whatever policies we have, whatever, for example, we have this midday meal in the government schools, but we need to make it, we need to ensure that it reaches the people who actually need it. It should be implemented till the grassroots levels. There are policies, but people who don't are not actually in need are utilizing it. So we need to make sure that people that the people who are in need have access to it.
Okay. Ishta?
Okay, very briefly again, both of them, I think they covered up most of the points. I think the scope of zero hunger, it has many dimensions. The first reason that both of them mentioned, apart from that, I think zero hunger, the causes of zero hunger would also lie in the climatic issues that we are having. India is largely monsoon dependent, and every year some region or the other goes through a drought. So that causes a big problem for food accessibility. Second is the war and conflict. One cannot discount the fact that the things that are happening in Ukraine, wheat supply in the world has gone haywire. And also, then we also have the information crisis, which widens the scope of this problem. We can have a bumper crop in Maharashtra and people in Bihar might be starving, and there is no way to access the grains in Maharashtra and transport it to Bihar. So this definitely widens the scope greatly of the problem that we have at hand.
Okay. And um, are there any more challenges to achieving zero hunger? I think we've covered most of them.
Right. So as I believe Ishita mentioned about, basically it's about food transportation is very important, right? Information both of transportation as well as of availability. For example, we have seen given the recent situation in Ukraine and the geopolitical scenarios, oil prices have been rising up very rapidly. Now, what we need to understand is a price in oil rise. What it basically means is a price rise in every other commodity we use, be it be food, be it be any other good, because everything is basically transported, and if the transportation cost rises up, so is the price of the commodity to the end consumer. Second of all, when talk about when also Ishita mentioned about a point about states like Punjab or Haryana having a lot of food and Jharkhand is not having food, let's say, right? The point about here is the government has a certain program called the buffer stock program, and there are certain programs as well. The only problem that arises in is a in part of the government about vigilance, about their alertness, about their how fast they're reacting to it, and b about how this, how the relationship between the central government and the state government is going forward. Because at the end of the day, we need to understand that these things are unfortunately playing a part in this arena, whilst we see, how there are sometimes delays and everything because of that. And obviously, natural disasters and all of these things are there. That is why, I mean, what I personally believe is that we in India, especially, we have a well-structured framework for on paper and theory how things need to go. The only problem arises with implementation or with how things should be implemented. That is what I believe.
Yes, absolutely. They all mentioned, both of them mentioned about infrastructure, poor infrastructure, lack of transportation facilities, and then food shortage. All those things aggravates the situation. Other than that, I would also like to add that while considering the particular issue of India, there is one thing that is a factor for each and everything. That is our economic inequalities, social inequalities, discrimination, which has been prevalent since decades and decades. So when it comes to food and its accessibility by all, then these factors also comes in, because we can't have access to we can't maintain access of food by all until and unless we don't have an economic and social equal community. So that also concludes.
Simply summing the both of them, I'd say that the political will in India is lacking, which is the biggest challenge to attain zero hunger in India. We have policies in place, we have our infrastructural system in place, but there is no bringing them all together and making a very ironclad policy to achieve zero hunger. So that is something which is very much required if we ever wish to achieve food sustainability in India or food self-sufficiency in India, which apparently India is, but of course there are many bottlenecks to that. So political will is lacking here.
As you mentioned, there are a lot of policies that are already in place. Um, what are the policies you think of when you think of achieving zero hunger? And some ideas that maybe you've come up with.
Right. So basically, about when we talk about policies to end or for achievement of zero hunger, basically, we need to understand there are two aspects to it. Again, A is a micro aspect when what you, me, or like people over here individually can do, and one is the macro aspect when what governments can do and what international organizations can do. From the on the micro aspect, we see things like we should not waste food, we should not should help out the needy people and all these things. On the macro aspects, however, there are certain very large points. There are points about trade restrictions. There are points about about dumping and anti-dumping duties. There are points about how the importance of food is comparable to the importance of human rights, international human rights. So these are the factors that when we see, like since the Green Revolution happened, right? And this is something wherein I slightly disagree with one of the panelists over here about since the Green Revolution, India has moved towards a food sufficiency aspect, wherein because of the use of fertilizers and chemical pesticides, the food yield has gone up exponentially. Now, I would agree that this is something which might not be very sustainable for the long run, but in the temporary run, I believe this was something necessary given the situation India was facing around the time the Green Revolution happened. So, and what I personally believe needs to happen in the macro aspect, especially in cases of India or countries wherein India is a country where the most around 40%, if I'm not wrong, of the entire employment is generated from agriculture. Yet only around 12 to 15% of the entire GDP contribution is from agriculture. The numbers are very wide, right? To understand the fact that it is important investment to be made in agriculture, and that is why it needs to become more sustainable, more organic. That's what I personally believe with regards to how steps need to be taken.
Avisha, please repeat the question, what it was. I got lost in Shaurya's answer.
Um, what are the policies that you believe in that have already been implemented in India to achieve zero hunger, and maybe some of your own ideas?
Rishi, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, okay. Currently, I would say that rather than coming up with new policies, let us implement the existing policies in a better manner. We know we have policies, but when it comes to implementation, we are lacking. So we need to analyze where are we lacking, what are the loopholes, and where we can improve as a country, as a community. And of course, we all are a part of humanity. So we need to develop that sense of humanity in ourselves, that how can we actually bring a solution to the problem. So that is all I would like to state about it. And giving it.
Okay, one thing that I feel strongly about in India is that we have a very huge buffer stock, and the Food Corporation of India is a very big PSU. And I think in 2021, it was in 2021 that 7 lakh ton of food went to waste, and that was the peak of COVID. And although they were not reporting of starvation, but people went hungry. So one thing that India needs to do is have a better policy regarding its buffer stock. Why is the government solely responsible for procurement of so much grains from the farmers, and at the same time when it is not reaching the markets, when there is shortage, when there is inflation, food inflation that we are going through? So I think the farm bills that recently happened, it had many loopholes and it was not as farmer friendly as they wanted it to be, but it had many good aspects to it. Like it encouraged investment into storage, warehousing, etc., into smoothing the supply chain management of the issue. And that is something that India requires, definitely requires. Of course, when one associates the name of private sector getting into agriculture, many dark things come into mind, that farmers will be exploited further and this and that. But currently, I think Maharashtra has the highest suicide rate of farmers. So, and one of the villages, I'm not being able to recall the name. On an average, every day, one farmer commits suicide, and the private sector is not involved. So, government sector is also not being able to take care of the problem. So, one thing that we need to do is a heavy investment. It can be in the PPP model. It can be in different models if the private sector is not to be trusted according to people. So we need a very strong supply chain management part to be done. Infrastructure bottlenecks have to be cut down, so that our food policy and our agriculture policy becomes smoothen. It becomes smoothen for us. We have the policy that I think UPA government brought, which provides free food to people, but still that does not provide the nourishment that is required. So giving free food, giving subsidies is not the answer. And this is one of the bottlenecks why buffer stock is taking up so much of food, and which is going to waste, and people are still hungry. This needs to be addressed, and right away addressed. So that is one thing that I would like to add.
Right. Ishita, I had a small question for you, if allowed by the moderator. Right. You mentioned about how the private sector or the private enterprises should be more involved in the entire process of supply chain management of the food grains, right? My question to you lies that we see that the primary aim of any private enterprise is profit making, whilst for public enterprises, it is the public good or whatever aim they have set in mind. So my question arises, what the government had been doing with buffer stock was using the PDS system, the public distribution system, to give it out at very cheap rates, around nothing, or basically 10 rupees, something like that. If private enterprise is about to come into picture, my question is, how do you sure, or what do you think will happen to the prices? Because the private enterprises will think about making a profit, at least a decent amount of profit, and not take a loss in any way whatsoever. So what will happen to the prices, and is it possible that that the situation further deteriorates, it becomes way worse?
See, first thing that I'd like to address here, that why do you think that profit making mentality is always wrong? Why would we have such kind of a notion? If I am doing a business, I would definitely want something out of it. Okay, and if it is in a in a legal manner, in an ethical manner, what is wrong in that? Nothing is wrong in that. Secondly, I would say that the kind of fear that you have, which is very legitimate. I understand where it is coming from. I think if you know about the 1991 liberalization, the same kind of debate happened a lot. And after that 1991 liberalization, I think India grew manifold. Okay, many good things happened. Of course, many wrong things also happened. I'm not saying that it's a foolproof system. That is why I also mentioned that if private sector is not to be trusted, there can be other models that can be incorporated, like the PPP model. Have the PPP model, have the right amount of restrictions, have the right amount of what do you call it, structures to make sure that the farmers are not exploited. But moving away from it, shunning it, that okay, they will have the profit minded mindset, so it will exploit the farmers further. We should not brush it away like that, because the government needs help of the private sector. And one cannot shy away from the fact that when private sector gets involved, it definitely brings in more innovation, more R&D, more efficiency. So we have to bank upon it, we have to capitalize on that fact. So that is what my point is, if you agree, if you understand where I am coming from.
Definitely.
Kushi and Ishita, you both spoke about the loopholes in the current system. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I elaborated the previous system, that what I felt
Yeah,
buffer stock part. Yeah.
okay.
Kushi,
Well,
would you
how
like
do
to
you,
add anything?
yeah,
Yeah, I also elaborated on the point of implementation of the policies at the grassroots level. So that is where we are lacking, and we also need to analyze these things.
okay. And how do you believe that, how do you think we can get to zero hunger in India?
Okay.
While okay, yeah, sure, go ahead.
No, Khushi, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So while talking about India, we need to take care of a lot of things. We talking about inequalities, talking about discrimination, talking about people's mentalities towards others, talking about that missing a sense of humanity in people, talking about that which Ishita also mentioned about the political will, and also and other countries, if we see that they're improving a lot by making use of science and technology. So if we start researching in science, and we are researching of course, but if we have a proper research and development in science, we can also come up with proper food production, and we can also move towards zero hunger. While talking about, if we talk about the genetically modified crops, these crops yield more on lesser land. So we can use technology uh, to produce, to have a good food production. Apart from it, we are investing a lot over animal agriculture. So if this the kind of land, the amount of land we are utilizing for animal agriculture, if we switch it to produce plants, we're heading towards veganism, then of course we can also move towards zero hunger, because and the investment we are putting towards animal agriculture and what we are getting in return is very less. So we talk about the conversion rates, it's very less. So if we switch towards plant production, then we have a brighter and more sustainable future. So, these are all my questions.
Ishita,
Right. Yeah, if I'll go ahead, if it's not fine. So basically, herein, first of all, I'll disagree with certain part mentioned by Koshi with regards to veganism and animal agriculture. So I'll say if you look at statistics and if you look at things, we've seen that mixed agriculture, basically the term which is referring to both types of plant and animal agriculture, is, I believe, the most sustainable part, because you understand that meat consumption is an entirely different issue, right? And at least in my opinion, is something which wherein it can be sustainable as well. It just needs to be in a proper balance and proper way. When we talk about secondly, coming upon to how zero hunger can be, the goal can be accomplished, we need to understand this is in terms of lot of aspects, right? If we talk about social aspect, as I believe Khushi only mentioned, with regards to discrimination in our country, with regards to social discrimination and all that, gender discrimination as well, we need to understand that these type of issues are there. That I remember when I was younger, reading in a book about how in a family of four, the male child was given milk while the female child was not. This was way back when I was in class 6 or 7, something like that. The point, however, remains, this is something which we can, I believe, still see in rural areas of our country, in states like Bihar, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, and so on. So this is one part. B part about the entire macro, understand that the agriculture sector is something which needs to become more automated, needs to become more centralized, which needs to, as Vishita also mentioned about HYV and all these which things which were part of the green revolution, basically need to be become more mainstream, because I believe the green revolution actually only happened in certain states, certain northern states, did not happen in the entirety of India. So that is why it needs to have become more decentralized, take place in all the states, right? And these mechanisms need to put in place. Also, the government obviously has, as I mentioned, I believe has the theory, the policies. It just needs very much better in infrastructure and implementation, be it the storage aspect, be it the distribution aspect. With regards to private enterprises, I believe it's very tricky, because I also don't believe it is wrong for them to seek profit, because they are putting in capital, they are investing. That is why it needs to be very safeguarded. This also applies when we talk about international markets at a large, because there are guidelines by WTO, by organizations about how much dumping and anti-dumping duties are there, how much these things are there. So this is something that needs to be put in place. And I like to conclude with the like this part about there's a global world hunger challenge initiated by the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, which had around five, if I'm not wrong, points about how we can move towards it. This actually provides us a very good insight into how we can take things in both the micro and the macro aspects. Over to Ishita.
Again, Avisha, please repeat the question.
how can we get to zero hunger
In India.
in India, and why do you care?
Okay.
You're muted.
Sorry. Okay, in India, zero hunger has many issues, as both of them mentioned. And first is the political will issue that we discussed earlier. Second is the social issue, which I think both of them again mentioned. Okay, and third is one thing that I believe India needs to do strongly is substitution. We are heavily dependent on imports as well. Like we are heavily dependent for our edible oil, so we need to substitute. We need to bring in more food products which are sustainable for the environment. I think Punjab and the western UP region produces a lot of rice, which is a water guzzling crop. And these are water deficient areas. So why are these states actually venturing into rice production? Why can't it be substituted by other more hardy crops which require less amount of water? So moving towards zero hunger requires us to have the right amount and the right kinds of crops as well, which are not harmful for the environment. So substitution is, I think, the both of them did not talk about. So I want to add that point. Substitution of crops is required. In case of edible oil, we depend a lot on oil palm. And that has a long gestation period. So we need to shift to crops which are having lesser gestation periods. So we need to do that. Apart from that, we need to diversify our food choices as well. And as I think the government is already doing, what do we call it, the golden rice thing that we have, that the rice is being coated with vitamins and minerals. I'm forgetting what we call it. We do that to address the issue of hidden hunger. So these are some of the points that both of them mentioned, and these are my points which I'd like to add. Substitution and adding grains, adding vitamins and minerals to the crops that we already are giving to the public to consume.
Really nice point. Substitution takes a look at a lot of factors and brings from it takes from the sources. Let's talk about how we can at the micro level, how we can bring zero hunger about.
Let's stop
Sure.
eating food that is on our plate. Take only as much as required. That is the first thing that every individual should do. And I think there are many volunteering organizations also which allow students and young people like us to collect food from them and go and distribute it to the people who are less fortunate. I think Robin Hood Army is one. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
associated with them. So they do that. So this is something everybody can do at the personal level. Do not waste food that is on your plate. Do not. And take only as much as required. It's okay if you fill your belly only 80% of its capacity, but do not take more than you should. And secondly, get associated with these organizations which because restaurants are another micro sites where food gets wasted a lot. So we can use that food and reduce hunger in our own very micro regions. And it is a big thing that we can do at our private level, at our micro level.
Right. As Ishita mentioned, obviously the points about not wastage of food and giving out food to people who are in need of it basically are very important points. These are obviously there. I also feel that there are certain more different points which have not yet been explored that much by India as well. Point about substitution, for example, right? There are, as mentioned by Ishita only, this can apply to in case of micro level as well because we see that there are regions wherein, for example, there are regions in Rajasthan wherein the millets, which are called millet crops, basically jawar, bajra, and so on, these are very commonly found. So these are and places where there's water deficiency. These are crops which are usually found because they are easier to get. Get. We also see the fact about about on the micro level to understand that. For example, whenever there's a food shortage or anything of that sort, right? When the COVID happened, people rush to markets to what people term as hoarding, basically, to get their hands on as much material as they can. Now, I understand that how what the psychological background is behind that, but at the same time, I also understand if people do that, this will result in black marketing and auctioning, and basically the demand going higher than supply, basic economics, saying that prices will rise, inflation basically will happen at exorbitant rates, and therefore people will not be able to afford what we call as food. So basically it is very important that people need to be educated about it, or be alert about it, be stay vigilant about it, so that they can take steps. As Aisha mentioned about Robin Hood Army and other organizations, right? What are they doing? They're just creating awareness and doing stop a small thing which they can. That's the most important part, I believe.
Yeah, sure. Totally agree with what Kishita and Shaurya said. Yeah, that's Rishita mentioned about the need of associating with such like Robin Hood Army and all. I also feel that we need to start from our homes. We need to teach the younger generation that if you cannot sleep peacefully if you have wasted a food. The child on the street is sleeping with a hungry stomach, and you are wasting the food. So we need to develop that sense. We need to develop that concern in the younger generation so that we have a sustainable future ahead. So it's not only talking about present, we also need to focus on the future of the country.
Now, why do you care about zero hunger? It's a more personal question.
I guess it is a kind of a social responsibility of each of us. And since we are belonging to an organization which is concerned about such issues, it is not only a social responsibility, it is our aim, it is our objective of working here. And apart from it, I feel that human life has a value. So if someone is hungry in my surroundings, it bothers me, it must bother.
Shaurya?
Right. Okay. So, what you want to understand again, why we care about it, why the UN created the 2030 Sustainable Agenda, the 17 goals in the first place. I'll start with a very famous quote, I believe, by Mr. Lester Brown. It goes about as follows: "We have not inherited the earth from our forefathers, but borrowed it from our children." So basically, what we see over here in this quote is that it's not about how why we need to take care of it. It's about we taking care of it for our children, for future generations, for humanity itself, right? If we treat it at if we treat it as our own possession, and we can do whatever we want with it, it will not last forever, as we've seen with global warming and rising temperatures and everything. To understand it, only if we preserve it will it continue to exist. If we do not, it will not, simply not, right? Therefore we will have no home. I mean, as of now, despite all our efforts for Mars, moon and everything, we only have one Earth, one planet wherein life can sustain, wherein life can exist as it does. That is why it is very essential for all of us to come together. I mean, I would even say go as far as to beyond interest, beyond economic interest. For example, if it is causing you a loss, at some point governments need to come forward and take a step for this purpose. Because what stats have shown us that the deterioration level is rising so much, especially in case of global warming and pollution levels we have seen in India, that it is becoming imperative. Government will come up, people need to come up and take steps so that this thing gets solved. It is not just our social responsibility, it is our natural or just existential responsibility. If we want to exist and if we want humanity to exist, we have to work for it.
I think both of them gave a very nice, very morally right answer that it is our moral responsibility. Apart from that, I believe, as the quote goes, that a threat, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Hunger anywhere in the world is a threat to my own self, my own person. I believe that zero hunger, I mean, hunger is not just an economic problem. And just because I come from a well off family, so I am insulated from these problems, this, it is not so. Hunger is caused by a lot of things, climate, then political. If I do not work for these things, resolving these issues from right now, from today onwards, it is surely going to affect me in my life, in my lifetime, and if not me directly, then my children, my oncoming future generations. So it is very important that I work on these things because it will have a direct impact on my own life. So that is why I believe that we apart from the morality that is behind it, the social responsibility it is behind that stays behind this, caring about this, it is because it is self-preservation as well. I need to preserve myself, I need to preserve my future generations, and therefore I need to work for it. I need to care about it. So that is why I believe we should care about zero hunger. We should care about bringing about zero hunger.
Lovely. Would Kushi give her closing statement? I think we can wrap this up.
I guess all of us discussed over various issues related to zero hunger, which was, of course, in need. And it's not just three of us or four of us coming together. We need to amplify the issues. We need to amplify the concern to as much as we can. So this is all I would like to state, and it was really great.
Shaurya, would you like to go ahead?
Right, definitely. So I believe this was a very fruitful session. I learned a lot from both Ishita and Kushi about how there are various aspects to it. We need to remember the fact that, if I'm not wrong, there are around at least around 800 million people today in the world who are suffering from hunger or starvation. And reports are to believe there will be an additional 2 billion people by the year 2050 on the planet, and we need enough food to feed them. That is why all of the entire aspects that we have discussed today, all solutions, both micro and macro level, be it, be them of any nature, political or other climatic or otherwise, need to be taken very seriously, and steps need to be taken for that. And that is why this sessions like this are very important, because there is awareness. They make us learn things. They make us aware. They make us so that we are able to educate others around us, and this starts a chain movement wherein by which we can initiate the proper movement to bring about this change, right? And the Wong movement is a very good example of this entire sustainability part. And we need to understand, in conclusion, that the second SDG, or any SDG for the matter, is basically about collaboration. We see this even the 17th SDG, if I'm not wrong, last SDG, about collaboration, right? And it is why it's very important that we collaborate with each other on all aspects and work for it.
I hope all of us right here and the Wong movement gets the outreach that it deserves and gets to more people and get them interested and sensitized about this issue, the global hunger issue, because it is one of the most inhuman injustice that we can inflict upon our fellow beings. And I hope that the target that we have, that is to achieve zero hunger by 2030, we at least at our personal levels be able to do enough to reach to that milestone and then move beyond and achieve greater things. So thank you.
This was a very lovely session. Everyone had their own perspectives, but they all complemented each other, and it gave us, I think, the audience a really wide perspective on the food infrastructure, the chain right now, factors affecting, and how we could work towards zero hunger. So, thank you, panelists, and for your lovely thoughts and discussion.
Thank you,
Um,
Avisha. Thank you, both of them, for having such complimenting views. And thank you, Avisha. It was a very well moderated and hosted event. So you did a great job.
Really, it was a really great session, and it was a pleasure and an honor, to be honest, being over here and discussing with both Khushi and Ishita. And you did a fabulous job facilitating the entire discussion.
thank you.
Sure. I learned a lot, and it was great addition managing and moderating everything. So good.
I learned a lot too. Didn't know a lot of things. All right, should we wrap this up?
Yeah, okay. Good night,
6:50.
everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Good night. Bye bye.
Night.